suppose it's mysterious, this reflective surface, the continual changing of its skin. It has all these moods that are registered. Every tiny little thing is registered on that skin. I was accustomed to being isolated from whatever situation I found myself in, either by virtue of my sex, my age, my culture, my interest. And it's gone on being like that for most of my life. Six years after I'd had a show in a London gallery, in a Piccadilly gallery, of these watercolours, I had been struggling really to find whatever it was. And I was at an all-time low, unable to work, and I happened to drag myself out of the house to the nearest point down there on the fishing beach one day and sat. And then there was just a movement, and there was somebody, another body, who was standing there against one of the boats and just started drawing without being conscious that I was actually doing a drawing. That was the magic moment. I had been looking for the human theme, and there it was. There was an unbelievable theatre of events going on. They would be the same people, and roughly the same activity would repeat, so that it was a given. The story, I didn't have to think up a story, it was there. They were there, and all I had to do was be there. In the end, I was drawn in spite of myself. And I was very honoured, in a sense, to be allowed into the community by being accepted as someone that had a right to be there. I was very conscious of the fact that this was a different community from any that I'd been used to before or knew anything about. And I genuinely wanted to know how it worked.
She was accepted into the fishing community right from the beginning, simply because, you know, if we were pulling out nets, and she would jump in and pull out nets with you. You know, she didn't just sit back and look, and then she took her time, and then she'd sit back and watch a picture, see what she wanted, look at the weather conditions, what you're working in. She put everything into the picture. She was actually depicting a scene in time, like a photograph, but with more, because you've got the more extreme elements she could put in, which you don't necessarily capture on a photograph. The wind, you can see the wind in the air of the fishermen trying to pull the nets over, etc. It's a picture's more alive than a photograph, unfortunately.
So I was able to square up the drawings, parts of them, and do the figure composition, I suppose, that had never really been possible before. The monochrome painting is that first example, and it kind of, I think I was aware that it was the seminal painting. It was the one in which I would more or less say everything that I would be able to say. I might expand upon it later in different ways, but it somehow seemed that one painting had to be the vessel. What seemed so interesting to me was the way they had such a huge focus in their lives down there, that even when they were standing around, it wasn't completely empty. That this intricacy of their existence It was the significance of it all. I then had to make the next leap into colour. I was very conscious that I didn't want to do anything hyped up in the way of colour with it, that it needed to be true to the way it is. I didn't want to feel like I was the artist taking something away from these people's real lives to make some, useless object out of real things.
I think she found an affinity with it and a nature associated with it. So I was aware that this is something she wanted to do, and she spent a lot of years. It isn't just come down, take a picture, go away, that's it, I've painted the fishing boats. She actually immersed herself in the industry for a lot of years.
They seemed at ease in their beings, really, as masculine persons, as male beings. And obviously that was a very attractive thing to someone like myself with so little experience of a real male world. It was such an extraordinary, many-limbed beast that this piggerback created, a surrealist thing, one strange human creature, and then this mad flurry of gulls excited by all the guts on shore. I think it's the consciousness every time you enter the water that you could just keep going. Maybe everybody has that feeling in certain situations, I don't know. The suicides off Beachy Head all get washed this way. So I don't know how frequent that is, but the bodies probably get intercepted before they get to me a lot of the time, but it so happened that one made it all the way here, and it was a woman who'd been in the sea, I think, about 3 weeks. As a subject, it seemed too momentous, really, for me to tackle, too dramatic in a way, but having done the drawing, having done the scribbled drawing, that fixed the experience in a way that kind of committed me to it. And then I felt I needed to explore it a bit further as an experience. And so I was really forced to make the painting rather than by decision. It came about through the gravity of the subject matter. Going off in the boat, as they do all the time, how subliminal a thought is it that, you're taking off into the unknown, and that it could be an end, and it is for a few. It's the daring, I suppose, of it. Nowadays, where there aren't many activities left that are as archetypal and primal as this, in this country. Obviously there are in other parts of the world, but here, on this tiny island, there are not many places left anymore. I had been at work on the theme for 10 years before I fell into a relationship with someone who had arrived in Hastings and who decided they were going to fish. And so I sort of had a different relationship to the community, the fishing community, in that way. He appears in quite a few of the paintings, and it was psychologically quite difficult to do, because I knew that he wasn't of the community, and physically he didn't resemble the Anglo-Saxon proportions of most of the fishermen. They can trace their families back, and they do have these characteristics. And he was tall and thin and red-haired, and definitely didn't look like one of them. Nor did he behave like one of them, because of course he did come from elsewhere. I had a child, and I was down there in both modes, as a partner, mother and an artist all at the same time. I went along with it all because that was what was happening. And it sounds incredibly passive from someone who actually is quite directed in the way I live my life. But in certain areas, I suppose, I've always had that attitude that I am open to what is happening, because, and it probably goes right back to my beginnings, where I didn't enter into life into what seemed a secure pattern. I just didn't have that. The family background was completely dislocated and dysfunctional. The situation of war was a dislocating condition of a time to be born into. So from my earliest experience, life wasn't about things that fell into the normal pattern of things. My partner Michael was not able really to afford a tractor, and he would have had to get one to continue, because that's the way it was going. People were needing to take more and more gear out there to go out in much more dangerous seas in order to make a living, and he never had a regular crew. And so it just became an unworkable situation. And so the painting depicts the tractor, and so it is the end of an era and the beginning of the next one, which we see now, where everything had to become much higher tech, really. The paint is very troubled. The birds flying overhead are obviously in a very sort of angry, disturbed state, and I myself was in that state at the time, because probably since about 91 I had begun to feel very ill all the time I was working, and I was used to feeling ill to some degree, because painting is such a tortured activity much of the time, or it was for me. But I didn't really begin to understand why I felt so bad until really I was at work on this painting, and because I found it a desperate painting to do, and I was getting, my hands were covered with paint. I was probably using my hands as much as anything else to make it. And I realised that I was actually being made ill by the paint itself. But that's why it's called an ending, because it it's an ending of an era on the fishing beach, where the coming of the tractors changed everything.
At the moment, you've got a pessimistic doom laying over the industry where no one's buying licences. People who've got licences don't know if they're going to be worth tuppence tomorrow because the government want to devalue them. But we just have hope. I mean, what else can we do? I've got everything invested in the fishing industry here. I've been fishing for 38 years, as I say, my family before. What option has a person of my age got when everything he's got is invested here? It's still, as they've always said, the fishing's the last of the hunting. You live on your wits and you catch what you can catch to the best of your ability, and there's always a sense of excitement when you go tomorrow. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I can't wait for tomorrow to go out there and pull my nets up.
It's such an ancient activity for human beings that have lived near the edges of land. They've always found ways of going off onto the water and somehow managing to harvest from it. It's hard to see it a moment where it would ever stop.